episode live of Dirty Scrap, the aluminum podcast, the podcast where we dig into the aluminum industry into the US. And today we have Dave Roth. And I want to make a special introduction today because David Roth is not just an icon in this industry, but also was my mentor, is still my mentor in this industry. He's like a father to me on this industry. And long story short, I came from Colombia 10 years ago. And during that process, I was fighting very hard to get into this industry. And then I met this gentleman here. He helped me from the start, how to make a good email to a customer and how to get into the customer's facilities and try to sell them something with value added. So Dave, thank you so much for being here with us.
You were an easy student, so that was...
Thank you so much. I don't know if your microphone is working properly.
Are we good? On this microphone?
I think you need to
Closer?
get...
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
So, guys, the idea today I will say the idea of this podcast is go very organic. So I want you to get to know David from scratch. So David, first question. How did you start in this industry? What are you studying? What is your background?
I think the most basic, right? I'm a metallurgical process engineer. I graduated from University of Missouri, which at the time was the name for the Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy. Went to work for Alcoa right out of school. That was in 19 of scrap processes, primarily in the area of dross.
Right.
Then I helped form a company called Altec. Had that company for about 25 years. Then sold my shares of that company, and then went as I'll call it a freelance guy for consulting and manufacturing representation, of which I did for Didion, a great company, and which now I do now for ReMA Cast House Engineering, another great company that focuses on scrap and drosses and scrap.
Got it. So from student to hardworking guy and then entrepreneur. But let me dig in a little bit more into your past. How did you get into this industry and what this industry was fascinating for you enough to get into it? Because you can choose ferrous metals or other kind of any other industry, but aluminum, why?
It was fairly simple in the beginning. You're a young college graduate, and you're looking for a job. And I had interviews with steel companies, and I had interviews with aluminum companies. And the steel companies had about, let's say, 10% less starting salaries than the aluminum companies. That was number one. And it wasn't like a big deal. Back then, 50 years ago, it was the difference between,
I can imagine,
$900 a month and $1,000 a month. Sounds like not much now, but It was a lot then. And the area of steel was a real dirty industry, and I didn't like
more
that
than
idea.
aluminum.
More than aluminum. Aluminum was very clean. All the aluminum recycling compared to steel recycling is very clean. So that appealed to me. Plus, I didn't know it at the time, how much I liked recycling, how much I would get ingrained to the recycling of waste products.
Right.
Because I really specialize in the lowest grade waste, the drosses and the slags and those materials in the metals industry.
And this is very interesting for this show because this show I think is more focused on the scrap jars, and scrap collection, sorting, segregation, all those kind of systems. But I think it's very important for us, and I think this is one of the ideas of this podcast, is to have these people that want to make this bridge between the scrap jar and the downstream industry that is melting and casting. So I want to dig in a little bit more on what do you do for the industry, but also I want to understand through the years, with your experience, how the industry being changed since, how many years of experience do you have right now, 35?
35, no, 74 to now, what's that, 52, right? So that's a lot of experience.
It's a lot of experience. So how the industry been changing through your eyes?
Well, I think primarily what I see is back in the 70s, there were the large companies, but they paid very little attention to the lowest grade materials. I mean, realistically, when I started, in a dross, for example, aluminum dross, it wasn't something that you were worried about the value of. It was something that you worried about, throwing away to the landfill and how much it cost you to get rid of the material. And over the years, you would see come from an average of maybe 20% aluminum, and through all the different processes that have been developed and paying attention to details, that's now 60 to 70% aluminum is a normal amount of aluminum in dross. And that's a huge difference. And also, so you saw the primary generators of these scraps being more and more and more interested in doing something themselves versus just the scrap dealers and the dross handlers and the secondary people.
Why? Is the market becoming more technical, more financial? What do you think? Because one of the things that I see that is very interesting in the US, if you compare it, for example, with Europe, is we have a lot of flexibility here. We still have a lot of landfill facilities. We still have a lot of flexibility from the point of view of environmental regulations that I think is good because it helps you to grow, but also I think it's something that is not allowed us to increase our recycling rates. And I think that is an important conversation that we will have later. But why do you think the industry is paying more attention on those details? It's getting more technical, more financial, it's getting more pressure from administrations that they want to go in the direction of being green. What do you think about it?
I think there's two things that are going on in my mind, right? Landfill costs, as you said, have been relative. I mean, I remember in the 70s, everybody was looking at processes because they were really, really worried about landfill costs going up. The realization is landfill costs have not changed that much. Freight has, the fuel costs and the tipping fees have all gone up, but not much if you look at the European marketplace.
Right.
So that has put kind of like for salt reclamation plants. Nobody in the United States has really been very interested in salt reclamation because it costs too much versus going into the landfill.
Right.
But on metal costs, right, the basic metal costs, that's gone up like crazy. So as those costs go up, you want to keep more and more and more material, aluminum, inside your facility, not send it outside to the secondary processors who are going to get their fees, their just fees for recycling those materials.
Right.
And so I see the big guys kind of doing it themselves, and then the small, more moderate companies, which we have a lot of in the United States.
And it's growing.
It's growing very much. And those companies go to the outside secondary sources to get those services done for them.
Right. So what you're saying is maybe this industry is becoming more, they are having more understanding about the cost and the importance of metal recoveries?
I think that goes in the metal pricing, right? When, LME over 3,000 now versus an LME of 1,000 is a big difference in what people pay attention to.
Right. Let's talk about the transformation of the industry. How this industry is transforming itself. Do you think it's more from the technological point of view, or what is the changes that we are seeing right now? Because you are more on the sales side, right? And this can give you, you are also on the operation side since the beginning. So I want to talk I want to go in two different directions. First, from the operator, automation, technology. We are seeing a lot of different stuff today, or do you think that we are not moving forward that fast as other countries from the technological point of view?
That's a difficult question from the viewpoint of, as you say, I started in operations. I started as a process engineer on the floor, and I did that for 15 years, right, in facilities. Then I went more into development of new processes that I saw needed to occur to bring these things up. But I can tell you, and I travel all over the world, I've seen very basic processes in countries like China or the East or Mexico in some facilities, and I've seen very sophisticated in those same facilities. So more and more are going to a higher level of sophistication, but you can walk into any melting operation in any country and see some very, very basic stuff, which is very concerning to me because these recycling things in the very basic form are not that expensive to save an enormous amount of money.
Right.
And people don't understand that.
Let's talk about safety, because I think it's very important, and I think sometimes we are not paying enough attention to safety and all these new technologies that can help the operator from the point of view of the process to be safe. So what do you think the US is doing in that regards? And because I know you have experience on, related to that, and I want you to dig in a little bit on your experience and how that experience impacted you in your life to the point that you start changing the approach of the technology here in the US.
Yeah, I think, and I've got personal involvement in this. You know,
Right.
when I was a young metallurgical engineer, I was in a cast house explosion, right? And every time I walk by a casting table, I flinch because my
Right,
skin understands how those burns can hurt you. And I think when you look at where we have been in the last 10 or 15 years and are really going quickly in automation processes, I think that's great. And we're you know, a lot of companies are going to automated casting startups in either ingot lines or DC casting tables.
Right.
We're using more cameras inside of furnaces. That was pretty common in Europe, and now in the United States it's getting pretty common, so that you can visualize what's going on inside a furnace and be safe about it. I think the general safety awareness that ReMA and all the big associations have done has been tremendous in raising the level of safety.
Let's talk about draws, because I know, as I said at the beginning, this show is very related to scrap yards, sorting, and I think it's great because we will need more clean scrap in order to increase our aluminum recoveries. But talking about aluminum recoveries, we will always generate some kind of draws. Let's talk about dross management, that you are an expert on it.
You know, dross management, as I said, has changed. If you look at in the 70s, material that was basically a landfill giveaway product, to now a material that's treated very well is in the 60 to 70% aluminum range.
Right.
There's a lot of technologies out there now that are recovering dross without salt, right? And I think that's a really important thing. I personally, and I've developed processes with other people, and there's other good processes out there to actually recover the dross without salt. The problem with using salt here in the United States is it ends up going to the landfill, right? And so you can literally send as much material to the landfill as you do recover aluminum. And it seems to me, and it's always seemed to me, that's such a waste.
But why? Why is that happening right now? Is because we have the landfills, because we have the flexibility, or is because we don't have enough understanding that we can recover metal from that waste that it is not, because some of this material is going outside, overseas. People is taking care of it and they are making money out of it. Why we're still sending these to the landfills? It's a complicated question, I understand, but I want to dig in a little bit on your experience to understand why we're still doing this.
I think, you know, and I've been looking, 20 years, 25 years specifically trying to change this. And the aluminum industry is a very slow-moving industry in some aspects, right? It's not like the computer industry or the AI industry that is just skyrocketing.
Yeah, the adjustment process is not that fast.
And so I think you have to really sell an idea at different levels in our industry now. As I said, there are processes out there right now that recycle drosses without using flux. But there's also in the United States, because this landfill is still about money, essentially.
Definitely.
It's about money.
Definitely.
When you use these other processes, you have to go into a little bit more capital, right? And if you can throw those waste products away, then you know you have trouble balancing that capital. You see a lot more interest overseas in Europe or in the Middle East for processes that preserve those items, because landfill is very, very expensive.
Very expensive.
And I still see it not about the level of the technology itself, but about the low landfill cost. And although we are very green and we are, you know, I don't like to say we're not interested in green technologies, because we are very much so.
Right.
But there's still an economic factor that people have to balance.
So what you're saying is, one way to increase our recycling rate from the point of view of dross management is to pressure the industry a little bit from the point of view of landfill cost. That can be the push that we need.
Yeah, I think the push that we need, it's kind of twofold. As the metal pricing goes up,
Right. I think at the end of the day, it's metal.
It's metal. At the end of the day, it's always metal.
Do you think that we have, like, today, into the cast houses, more disciplined companies or more reactive companies?
More discipline.
Disciplined companies.
Yeah.
So you are seeing that during the years, the people are getting more disciplined on what they want to do and planning ahead instead of just reacting.
Yeah. And a good example is the ReMA equipment, right?
Right.
The ReMA equipment is totally focused on cast house automation, in charging, skimming, and visualization of what's going on. 10 years ago, 5 years ago probably, we saw very, very few automated systems for skimming and charging, and now everybody is looking at automated systems for
Right.
skimming and charging. It's not only for the energy, but it's also to protect. We talked about safety, right? When you do all of these things in an automated fashion, you get better quality dross, you get better lower melt losses, you get better recoveries, and you do it in a safer manner.
Right.
And all of that adds up to a more economic operation.
Definitely. What do you think about what we are seeing right now from the point of view of operators and lack of good labor in this industry? Because it's an issue, and definitely the industry wants to go or having good people working with them or automation. Definitely automation is something that we will see grow during the years, but do you think it's going to impact the industry in a positive way, or definitely we will have dependency on this, let's say, cheap labor that we have right now?
Well, I don't see any cheap labor around.
Well, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. But let's say that, because one of the problems that I am seeing is companies are struggling to keep the people inside
Yeah.
the facility. So it's going,
Yeah.
on and off. And the problem with that is growing a facility like that is super complicated because you always need to go back and, make training. So do you think automation can replace that?
No, I don't think automation can replace it. And I see it in two areas. First, labor.
Right.
We work in a dirty industry. And you either like that.
That's why they have Dirty Scrap podcast.
That's right. And we either like that or you don't like it.
Exactly.
And I and a lot of our engineers and a lot of the laborers love that. They love getting their hands dirty. They love being outside or in a factory. Those are exciting things to some people. Fewer and fewer people, however. Right. Young people who come into the industry, they have this affinity to a phone or to a computer or to a screen that they feel comfortable with because they've grown up with that from when they were kids.
Right.
So I think the more you can automate and have a control panel where you're operating the equipment from a remote location,
Okay.
right? Now, these guys feel comfortable stepping into a control room and operating items physically, seeing this big piece of equipment moving with a joystick or a handle.
It's getting interesting for them.
It's getting interesting for them. It's what they're used to. It's that screen. So I think then you can keep people working in that environment. From the engineer's viewpoint, okay, and the process engineer and all the other engineers, these levels of automation start to make it a lot more exciting for their involvement because you get a lot more high-level electrical and automation engineers, and the process engineers are using new ideas because it's really tough to promote engineers to come into our industry, right?
Right.
And you have to do this promotion.
But why is that? And how we can implement better approaches for those engineers to get into the industry? Because I remember when we started working together, we create eExperts. There was a platform that, because at the beginning for me was super complicated to get into this market, and thanks to you, I finally made it. I am still working on it, of course, but when we create eExperts, the idea was to have a platform with people like you with a lot of knowledge to help us to digitalize that knowledge to keep the knowledge available for the people that wants to get into this industry, the young engineers. But at the end of the day, I'm seeing that it is not easy, as you just said, to bring those guys into this industry. From your experience, what we can do to trap those guys and to keep those guys in love with this industry?
Yeah, I think you have to address it at a very young age, and I've worked with a couple of different organizations that look at that. Like, you know, when you're in high school or when you're in college, it's almost too late, okay,
Really?
to generate that interest in the primary metals industry. The people have to be made aware of the importance of metals and primary metals and scrap and all of these things that we deal with at a very young age to start thinking that it's a cool thing to do.
Right.
I have a daughter who's into illustration, right? And we've worked with illustrating heavy equipment to bring it into the children's viewpoint so that they see that, you know, driving an end loader or operating a crane is pretty cool. Okay?
Right.
And I think it starts there. And I think when you get to that basic level in primary school and then it goes into high school and then more of the companies are dealing with reach programs to go into these schools, but it has to be at a young age. It's once they're in college, I think we've lost them.
So what we need to do is to create culture, social culture since the beginning regarding the recycling and how important it is, and also that you can make money out of it.
Yes.
Good money.
Well, you can make good money, and it is an exciting industry,
It
right?
is,
I mean,
definitely.
you look at this program that is here. This is very exciting, right?
Oh, it is.
This show, what we do here. You know, you can really get excited about it. And if you bring other people into that, I think they feel that level of excitement. For them to understand that it exists, I think, is the difficult part.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the commercial side. I want to dig in because I am in the commercial side, and I don't want to make this platform a commercial platform, but definitely I think I want to understand how you, as a salesman, can go into a facility and convince a company to invest in new technology that is something that they are not related to it. For example, with what I'm doing, the coating systems and melting furnaces and everything, is every day is a challenge because you need to help them to understand. Sometimes it's not what the customer wants, is what the customer needs. From the salesman point of view, what this industry is, I mean, how you approach for those to those facilities.
Yeah, from a sales point of view,
Yes.
right? My approach, and it's always looking at primarily what I do is help a customer improve recovery.
There you go, because this is interesting, because once we are seeing people that wants to jump into this industry, it's not just for operators, it's also for salesmen that want to get into this industry and make money out of it and help the industry to grow. So yes, just keep going. Let us know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't sell, in my case, right? I don't sell a specific piece of equipment when I go in to see a customer. Right. I look at that customer. He typically brings me in because he wants better recovery of dross, or he wants better recovery of scrap, or he wants that type of thing, or energy conservation. And so I go in and I have a very open mind on what is the best solution for that customer.
Yeah, we like to sell solutions, not equipment.
And not equipment. And hopefully, you know, from our own commercial viewpoint, our equipment may cover some of those solutions, right? But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're gearing him to another solution if you're a good salesperson and not just selling what you happen to have in your bag of tricks.
Yeah.
But the customer will look at you as a resource to help him improve his operations. If you don't focus so much on what you do, you make
Let's
it
talk
a little
about
bit more
resource, because this is where experience come in, right? Because it's not just equipment from the technical point of view. When you talk about resources, what do you mean?
You know, I've got another group of guys that I work with, right? And we call them pocket advisors.
Pocket advisor, I know them very
right?
well.
And so when I go into an operation and I see a specific problem that isn't part of my scope, right, which is the improvement of the recovery. It might be an environmental issue, it might be purely an operations issue, and I will take one of those things and offer these guys who are senior process engineers or production people, and offer those to the customer for help. Because very often what I've seen in today's marketplace is, you know, we don't have a lot of senior people. The guys, when I graduated in a cast house, a big cast house like Alcoa cast houses, we might have brought in 10, 15 young metallurgists and dispersed them. Now a big operation might only have one process engineer.
So, but that is related to what you just said. That is hard to bring engineers into the industry. Okay, so we are having that problem. How those companies is dealing with that? Because if you cannot bring young people into your facilities, how you can deal with that? Mostly when you have people like you, and I don't want to mean that you're old, but in some point you get just to retire, right? How you can keep the industry moving forward when you have all these resources going out and nothing going in to learn what you know?
Yeah, I think that goes back to, you know, I talked about going back to the grade schools and the high schools and universities. I think one of the things that we can do in the university level, okay, because I think there's still time, is generate interest, and you and I have talked about this, and generate interest where experienced industrial people go into these universities via some type of mechanism and start talking experience, start talking kind of the fun and the details, all right, that they don't learn in school, of dross and scrap and all these different things.
They will love it.
I think they would love it too.
What is the biggest mistake, excuse me, a salesman can do?
The biggest mistake a salesman can do.
Because during the years I made a lot, believe me, a lot. But from your experience, what is the biggest one that you can do once you want to approach with a solution with a bunch of resources that you have? What is the biggest mistake that you can do?
Well, to me, the biggest mistake is assume that you know everything, right? And that you can answer every question.
Right.
Because you can't, right? And when you have a question that you can't answer, you just have to promise the customer and deliver on the promise to find an answer for him, right? You can't be a know-it-all salesman. But on the other hand, you have to know what you're selling. You have to be intimately involved.
Definitely. So you need to be honest. You need to be ready, prepared, but also you need to understand the point of view of your customer. How you understand the point of view of your customer instead of trying to sell something.
Well, I think experience is a big part of it, right? I'm lucky, okay, and I'm unique, okay, because I've got production experience of many years. I've formed my own companies. I've got lots of patents. I've done a whole lot of different things, so it's very easy for me. But as you said, you know, I took you on from the viewpoint
I appreciate it.
And you have to understand when Julio first came and Gonzalo, who's with Hormesa, asked me as a favor to take on Julio in a mentorship. And Julio really didn't have great understanding of English yet.
Oh no, my English sucks.
Right.
It is what it is.
But I mean, he was very basic, but had a tremendous drive and enthusiasm. And to be successful, drive and enthusiasm are two critical points of what has to happen. And Julio's a metallurgical engineer also.
I'm a material engineer.
Yeah, so it helped that he had a good basic background in the science of the metals. So
now that you are talking about that you went from operation to build your own company, let's talk about you as an entrepreneur. Why drive you to get into the point that you want to build something? It was just you want to make money, you want to go further and have no boss, or you wanted to change the industry from the point of view of you know something or you knew something that other people didn't know, and you was trying to push in that direction. What was it? And how is to be an entrepreneur in the U.S.?
I think for me, right, and I started with big companies, and in one sense, when you have good ideas, you have to sell those ideas at all sorts of different levels.
Right.
And sometimes you can be successful at doing that, and sometimes you cannot. And as an entrepreneur, and I would say probably 75 or 80% of the positive change that's been done in the recycling industry has been done by entrepreneurial people who are taking the risks to develop things that the big companies ultimately use.
Right.
But the big companies may not have believed in the development, but the entrepreneur believes. He knows he can get done anything he wants to do as long as he can visualize it. And I think that's the thing. In a big company, that's kind of squashed, all right, because there's other priorities. And so the real entrepreneurial brain doesn't necessarily have a smooth go of it. But on his own or in an entrepreneurial company where he's left to do his own thing, great achievements can occur.
What is more complicated when you are an entrepreneur, to build the right solution or to build the right customer trust? Because it's two different things.
Yeah, well, as I said before, you're looking for a solution, right? So as an entrepreneur, you have to make money.
Oh, definitely. If not, you're done.
Right. If your company, you have to have a good idea and you have to make money. And so you have to find kind of that sweetheart customer who's willing to step out on the limb with you. Right. And that's so important for new ideas. Because when you have that customer and he trusts you and you trust him, because in the development of a process, things are going to go wrong. Okay?
Oh, definitely.
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to backtrack. And as a small entrepreneur, you don't have the company there to do those kind of development.
Not at all.
You have to rely on the customer. And so that relationship is so important. And I bet you, 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs here at this organization who have done this kind of development work, they have that sweetheart customer who has helped them and is willing to do things that are
and I think here in the US we have a lot of those guys that allow you to go in there and try your solutions, and they are willing to help you, and I think is very important in the industry to grow. What is the biggest lesson that you have from the previous years, from the commercial side but also from the technical side, that you can merge those together?
Man, biggest lesson.
Yeah.
I'd say things develop very slowly, and I'll give you an example. I first patented the dross press when I was with Arco Aluminum in the late 70s, early 80s, the dross press now.
Okay.
All right. When I formed Altec, we commercialized the dross press. Okay, that was in the late 80s.
Okay. That was a baby.
And this particular piece of equipment, the dross press, is still being sold today.
I know.
And it's probably the most popular piece of equipment, and there's a lot of people making them that handles dross. But my God, how long did that take, right? We have a new piece of equipment now that brings that to another level that we've developed in furnace dross pressing.
Right.
The resistance to new technology is always going to be there. And what you think will take 5 years takes 15 years on new technologies, which is really a frustrating part of trying to...
This is something that I want to talk about, the frustrating part of being a salesman or an entrepreneur, because at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same. How you deal with frustration and how you can help these young guys, the young generation that is coming and they want to be sales guys, how you can deal with it instead of just backing up and saying, no, this is not for me.
Well, you have to have a very thick skin.
Right.
Right. You have to be able
But you can develop thick skin, right?
Well, some people
Some
can.
people do.
Some people do, some people don't. And I think, everybody is not meant to be a salesperson, right?
Right.
You have to know how to take no and not have it affect your attitudes.
Right.
I know when I went from being a pure engineer to saying, hey, I want to try sales, I had to study sales. I took a lot of these, at the time, there was nothing online back then, but there were a lot of these tape courses and things like that, and you could go to seminars. And I did a lot of that to learn how to be a good salesperson, because it is not a natural phenomenon to be a good salesperson, right?
No, it is not.
So you have to understand, have a very, very high attitude. You have to trust yourself. You have to be able to take no, and you have to have some really knowledge on the psyche of people on how to sell.
Right. So we've been already through your background. We already know a little bit more about you, and we went from how to sell a solution, how to talk to a customer, how to teach the young generation to, come into this industry. Let's talk about recycling rates. Let's get into what we are seeing right now in the US, because for me, as a Colombian guy, traveling around the globe and going a lot of, trips to Europe, seeing the recycling rates in Europe, that is around average 75%.
Right.
When you see here, for example, talking about UBC in the US, it's around 44%. Why? We are seeing that when we also are seeing that the industry is kind of like growing in the recycling, talking about recycling facilities. The small guys are growing up, big companies are merging together, so they want to keep the track on the direction of keeping the recycling moving forward, but still we have very low recycling rates. Why?
Yeah, I think it's a political question.
Complicated.
Right. I mean, typically those states that have deposit laws have much better recycling rates than states that don't have deposit laws. But there is a lot of political resistance to have states that have deposit laws, because so many cans and metals go into the landfill.
66%.
Oh my God, right? And that's a big number because of the amount of aluminum in the United States.
It is.
If that aluminum was back into the recycling. But on the other hand, I mean, just curb recycling laws are different from state to state. The equipment needed to do the separation is out there.
It
right?
is. Yeah, the coding systems are out there.
Yeah, they're all out there, but people have to invest in them. And I think we were talking about metal values.
Right.
I think with the metal values going higher, you'll see more interest.
We should.
Excuse me, but I don't know. I think it's more political than.
So, do you think if we have like a aluminum recycling industry union that unify all the states under one law is going to help, or is going to be too complicated?
I don't know. I mean, if the Aluminum Association and ReMA both have advocacy groups that go after those recycling levels in Washington, D.C., and I think that's a constant push.
Right.
That's not my expertise, so I don't know a whole lot of how the detail would do that.
That's fine. In order to wrap up this episode, I want to get into what is still exciting for you in this industry, that you're still working on it. And I know it's not just about money. I know it's something else. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I get excited. Primarily, I get excited saving metal units, not putting material into the landfill, and helping the planet. I mean, this is my first level, right?
Right.
As long as I think I can have good ideas and influence people to help this planet be a better planet, that excites me. Number two, I love helping young people, because I see that when guys like me have disappeared, there needs to be backfill. There needs to be more people following us and being excited about the same ideas. I mean, just recently in my head, I have a couple of new ideas for a couple of new patents, and it's the first time I've had a realization that, hey, Dave, you're almost 75 years old, okay? You're
still young.
You're not going to have time to develop these things.
Right.
Okay? You have to give these ideas to young people and get them excited about these ideas so that they can develop them also.
Right.
And I think for me, that's my new passion, is trying to figure out how to get those young people and how to influence them and how to bring them into this.
So you're still optimistic about the future of this industry. What do you see for the future of this industry? What do you think is the future will looks like?
I think if you look around this convention center and you look at this room behind us and all the booths and all the people.
Right.
It's so exciting, and all the new stuff. And every year you see more AI, you see more sophisticated separation technologies that weren't there before. And we keep digging down into the scrap recycling to make everything more valuable.
Right.
That's the exciting part. I mean, that is so exciting to be able to differentiate by alloy, by just a device, an instrument, being able to blow it into one container or another.
Right.
And those are super exciting things.
Well, David, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the audience here. Really appreciate it. And go and check the episode. Dirty Scrap is live there. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for to the ReMA show. Really appreciate it. David, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Woo-hoo.